Welcome to The Writer's Dream. This is the land of books and authors, where authors can talk about how they write their books, how they publish them, and how they market them. You can find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page called The Writer's Dream. We are also on YouTube, and you can see about 130 interviews with interesting authors, most of them local. It's unbelievable how much talent we have here on Long Island. If you wish to be on the show or you have a question for me, please message me through the Writer's Dream Facebook page. Today's guest is a returnee. I call them recidivists, who's Roland Allnach, who is the author of many, many books. Today he's going to talk about his latest book, Oddities and Entities 2, Vessels. So, Roland, welcome.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you for having me.
Here.
Yes, it's great to be back, as always.
So tell us about your latest venture.
Well, Vessels is another anthology that I've done. It's Oddities and Entities 2, following my second book, which was Oddities and Entities. It's all new stories, independent stories, but similar topics, similar themes as the first book, just going a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole.
I'm afraid.
Well, that is part of the journey. It is a path into the strange and the surreal and the unknown, with bits of supernatural, a little bit of horror mixed in there. But really, it's about people being put into strange situations and now trying to have to figure out where they're going to move forward from there. So it's a fun trip.
Yeah, well, I have read some of your stories, and I must say they are different.
Thank you.
Why did you get into this genre? I won't call this science fiction. What do you call it?
No, it's a little bit difficult to classify.
Yeah.
You know, there's this term cross-genre, and it's sort of like a mixed bag of different things. Be that as it may, I think it applies well to what I write, because I try to incorporate a lot of different elements. So it's hard to just say it's this or that, but I think that helps make it more interesting because there are more perspectives there, both for the characters and for the readers. So I think when people come into one of my books and they're reading some of my stories, they never quite know where it's going to go.
Yeah, but that presents a problem because oftentimes you go on a website, you know, there are lots of websites out there where you can get your book on for free, which is a great thing, but they always ask you to pick a genre.
Yes.
You know, they have this whole thing you have to fill out and to describe what the stories are. So what do you say?
I usually class it as supernatural, paranormal, or horror, whichever. Sometimes they're lumped together in one, you know, slash.
I like paranormal. I think that's a good, you know.
Yeah, the supernatural paranormal I think is a better fit, and it's not to detract anything from the elements of the book that are somewhat unsettling, but I think today when people hear horror, they're thinking of a certain particular horror.
Yeah, the zombie
Yes.
and
Right.
the zombie apocalypse.
And, yeah, those topics, they're current, but they don't really apply to what I'm writing. The horror element I like to employ most of all is Gothic horror. So it's a slow, brooding, it's a more cerebral effect, this creeping chill. Because, well, I feel it's for both, you know, my author's perspective, from the perspective of my characters, and most importantly from the perspective of readers, this is a great way to get inside someone's head and inside their imagination. Because as an author writing the stories, I try to set the stage for as many of the elements as I can, and then let the reader go the rest of the way. One thing I think it's important for authors to remember is a reader's imagination is far more complex than anything an author can try to install in that memory or instill in that memory. So your idea, your job as an author really, is to take the reader by the hand and lead them to their own little place, and then let them start to fill in the gaps. You know, it's the old thing. What someone sees in a dark room is far scarier than what someone else could describe to them, because they're bringing subconsciously their own elements in there. As an author, you just try to shape that space, give it some context, and let the reader fill in the blanks.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's the best writing, where you provide the situation.
Yes.
You sketch out the character and let the character tell the story.
Right.
Really. Do you write in first person or?
I do third person. I've done a few rare times. I've done first person. I just find, yeah, and for every author, they have their own preferences to which they find more, you know, more in their comfort zone. That just happens to be my comfort zone. Plus, the way I like to structure my stories, I find it easier using the third person, because then I can shift back and forth, different characters. Um, it's usually, if you want to be technical, it's usually a third person limited. So it's not a first person I, but it's section to section pretty well anchored around one consistent character. So you're a little bit separate from that character, but at the same time, everything is immediate to that character.
Well, third person makes it easier to say what all of your characters are thinking.
Yes.
Because it's third person. I like to write in first person, then I have to be careful of what they call head hopping.
Right.
And I cannot read the other character's mind from my first person character. I have to, by some gesture or some action that they perform, indicate how they're thinking or feeling, which is a lot harder. And I mean, when I first started writing, I had a hard time with that. But I shift also, but my stories are mostly first person. Even the short stories I've written are first. I wrote a story about a doe and her fawn during hunting season from the viewpoint of the deer. So even the deer was first person.
There you go, duck and run.
This is something that you could really get into.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of a horror story, actually. So,
When the hunter comes in, certainly.
yeah. Now, knowing you as I do, you work in a hospital. Has that ever had any influence on the subjects that you pick?
Well, in terms of exact circumstances, no, because there's certain professional limitations there. But it has given me the opportunity, if you want to call it, to see things you don't normally see in everyday life.
Thank God.
Yes. On the one hand, thank God. From a creative aspect, in a way, thank God as well, because I think, and it's not so much for seeing, the traumas and things like that, but I always thought being there and in certain cases being able to see how people react to things was what really, would make an impression on me. Because you can flip on the news any night of the week and hear about a car crash or this or that, and you just see or perceive the shock value of the moment. It's very different being in a room with people who have just, endured a tragedy or suffered something,
Right.
and now you're seeing those emotions firsthand. And in terms of constructing a story and characters and being an author, it's those emotions that really make stories real, that make characters real, and allow readers to connect to it. What they're actually seeing, again, you can describe it a little bit to set it, the reader can fill in the blanks, but it's the emotional part that's going to bring the reader in.
Yeah, when I do a writing workshop, I always talk about you have to make the reader fall in love with your characters, whether you're loving them because they're horrible or you have to emotionally engage with the characters, and the only way you could do that is to, as the writer, expose their feelings.
Absolutely.
Or expose their actions so that you
Right.
can read into their feelings.
One of my little rules of thumb as an author is if people can't emotionally connect with your characters, they're not going to emotionally connect with the story.
No, not at all.
Because there's not going to be any impact then.
Right. I mean, there are very few stories that are so great that they stand alone without character or description or setting. I don't know what the number is, but somebody said there are only a finite number of plots that you can use and plot twists. So, yeah. Are you going to read a little bit from one of these stories, if you would
Sure.
like?
I reach over here, and there's one section that I like to read. As an author, a book lover, so there's this one section kind of hints at a character who happens to be a librarian in training, and she has her own little love of books, obviously. But to set the story, it's from Vessels, and the name of the story is Unspoken Undying. And I chose a librarian, a library setting, because these are very peaceful, tranquil types of ideas, meditative. The character, Amber, who's the core of this section, she woke up in the morning and realized that she can levitate. And her neighbor is a set of eyes floating in a pool of dark water through the windows as she walks by. So, yes, it's a leap. But what I wanted to do with the story was create two levels. There's this very mundane setting of the library and walking to work. And then on this other level, there's this surreal, otherworldly part that's, she can levitate, this strange state of her neighbor. So in the section I'm going to read, she's now walking through the library, and we get a little glimpse inside her head and see how she's interpreting things. The city library was a massive structure of intimidating granite, reminiscent of something from an old vampire movie. Despite the brooding gloom of the exterior, the interior was beautiful, even with the age of the building. Large wrought iron chandeliers hung by chains from the arched heights of vaulted chambers. Half-moon windows of stained glass crested long, clear panes that looked out to dense gardens. Elsewhere, the building was crowded with deep-stained oak shelves that held the library's endless rows of books. The high walls of the central room were adorned with ceramic tile mosaics of radiant fish adrift in the timeless wisdom of the ocean. Balconies ringed the lofty space, not only to provide a view, but also to serve as home for small reading areas more secluded than the central room's lengthy communal tables. The library seemed dated in its Gothic glory, yet Amber liked that it moved in its own bubble of space-time. The city could do what it pleased, technology could flitter in its restless nature, but the library served as a little island of years gone by, of ages linked and immortalized through its collection of books. Although Amber was yet to be a full librarian, she already held a deep love of books, viewing them as quiet but living testaments to the dreams of those swallowed by mortality. All humanity could vanish, data drives and memory banks could go mute when power failed, but books would remain. Silent though they were, Amber was certain she could hear their whispers in the solitude of the stacks. We were here, and we were real. We put our dreams in words and left them to you. All you have to do is open your eyes. Two of her co-workers, Marcy and Dave, were full librarians. Amber thought of them as intellectuals for lack of any other identifier. They had read so many books, knew so many things, that they seemed to have lost their place in the world. Amber felt there was some kind of irony there, but she didn't care to dissect its nature. She was content to leave the books closed and listen to the soft rustle of their voices as she passed. It dispelled some of the lonesome solitude of her life, so it was fine by her. She smiled as she rolled her book cart between the shelves. Some people might find her job tedious, but she embraced the serenity of the library's dormant depths.
That's very nice.
Thank you.
Very nicely described.
Thank you. Well, that's also one of the reasons why I like to write in the third person. I can switch between my characters and their thoughts, but I can provide an underlying framework of my own narrative voice. And I think given some of the subjects that come up in my stories, it provides a nice anchor of neutrality. So as far out as the characters go, and as strange as some of the things may happen, there's still that stability of the narration underneath it. So it's sort of like a neutral territory, a safe spot. But that voice, I feel it allows me to bring other elements into the story. You know, not every character would think with certain sounds and intonations in their language, but with a third-person narration, you can bring that in as your narrative element and really add a whole other aspect to the reading experience of the story.
Yeah, I guess it's all what you're comfortable with.
Yes, absolutely.
Because in my main character, it's the way she sees things.
Right.
So, and that's what I enjoy about writing. I enjoy writing from the standpoint of one person watching. And so it's an author's choice. Now, let's get to the nitty-gritty of being an author.
Okay.
Yes, I know. So you did not self-publish, right?
No, this is with my the publisher I've used in the past, All Things That Matter Press. This is the fourth book I've done with them.
Are they a small press?
Yes, a small press. So very happy working with them. They gave me my first shot with my first book. I did self-publish 2 books. The last 2 I had done, the Writer's Primer and the Digital Now. That was more of an experiment, just to see how that process would work, doing it all on your own. I certainly wouldn't have ventured to do that without the experience of working with my publisher. Having done 3 books with them before those 2, I think an important part of working with a publisher is having editorial input and having editorial review of your work. Not everybody has the resources to go out and hire an editor on their own. You know, I definitely did that with the 2 I did on my own. With a publisher, you get that service with your publication. But coming in from the outside, it's really a crucial, vital learning experience, being able to work with someone's edit of your book, seeing where your narrative strengths and perhaps more importantly, where your weaknesses and deficiencies lie so that you can address them and see them addressed in an environment where there's still a constructive path towards publication, rather than someone just looking at your book and saying you need to fix this, fix that, and then you go along your merry way. You're working in as I said, a constructive environment with a publisher who is now your partner to get a product out, your book, in the best possible shape that your collaboration can create.
Well, that's what happens with self-publishing, except you pay for it.
Yes.
And the more services you contract for, the more expensive it is. Right. So my feeling with my first book was that I wanted to self-publish. I wasn't going to wait around. I didn't really know enough about the industry to find small press, to tell you the truth. Didn't even know what it was. So I went with self-publishing, but I was really happy because I had all these services. I learned, it was almost like taking a course publishing that book, because I learned about all the services that were available and how things worked. Right. And then I liked the fact that they took care of the ISBN number, and they took care of all those catalogs they put me on and made an ebook for me, and I didn't even have to think about this stuff. So I love that. And you published all of these books since I know you, which is only, what, about 3 years?
6 books in 6 years. So I've been doing,
wow.
On average, a title a year.
Yeah.
I love to write. What can I say?
Yeah, no, but that's great. And you have your one book on how to.
Yes. And
I think that's very important.
Yeah, I did that. As I said, I came into this very much from the outside.
Me too.
And as you were alluding to, all the things you learn going through the process. I put a page on my website called For the Writer when I put my website together around the time my first book was coming out. Just looking for something to try to not only distinguish my website from other author websites, but to try to offer something back. Because I thought, I'm sure, and in the meantime, it's pretty well been proven to me that a lot of people were coming into publishing in much the way I did. It was a passion, it was something they felt compelled to do, but they didn't have that background knowledge as to what they could expect, what the processes were like. So I thought, well, why not put a book together based on my experiences? Because what I learned on my own, and then comparing to other authors I've met, such as yourself, is that these experiences I had were pretty common to what's out there. They were my singular experiences, yes, but they were not unique necessarily to the publishing experience. And yes, I do a number of presentations based on the book to share back the knowledge, and people really appreciate it, which is nice.
Not that we're in competition or anything, but I also do a workshop with another author that we know, Karen Bonet, on So You Want to Write a Story. And the most amazing thing, I'm sure you find the same thing, is that the participants in the workshops want to write a book, but they haven't a clue as to what to do.